Imagine you're on a short flight home. It's supposed to be a quick trip, like taking a bus in the sky. You're thinking about what to have for dinner or the work you have to do tomorrow. But then, everything changes. 4 men stand up. They aren't looking for the bathroom. They have knives and what look like deadly explosives. Suddenly, your routine flight becomes a living nightmare. This is the story of SQ117, the day the world learned why you never ever mess with Singapore. It was March 26, 1991. An Airbus A310 took off from Kuala Lumpur, headed for Singapore. It's a flight that usually takes less than an hour. But just minutes into the air, the peace was shattered. 4 hijackers took control of the cabin. They shouted orders and terrified the 114 passengers and 11 crew members. They wanted the plane to fly to Sydney, Australia, but the pilots knew they didn't have enough fuel to make it across the ocean. After a tense standoff in the cockpit, the plane managed to land at Singapore's Changi Airport at 10:24 p.m. But as the wheels touched the tarmac, the real nightmare was just beginning. Changi is usually a place of vacations and happy reunions, but tonight, it was a fortress. The plane sat on a lonely, dark runway, surrounded by flashing lights and elite police teams. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with fear. The hijackers were getting angry. They wanted their friends released from jail in Pakistan. They were pacing the aisles, making threats and showing off their weapons. They weren't there to talk. They were there to make a point. Here is where things got really scary. At 6:45 in the morning, the hijackers gave an ultimatum. They told the negotiators that if their demands weren't met within 5 minutes, they would start killing 1 passenger every 10 minutes. Think about that. 10 minutes is barely enough time to finish a snack. To the people trapped in those seats, it was a countdown to the end. But while the hijackers were screaming and making threats, something was happening in the shadows that they couldn't see. Singapore wasn't just waiting around, they were preparing. You see, Singapore is like a very quiet, very polite neighbor who also happens to be a grandmaster at martial arts. They don't want to fight, but if you bring one to their doorstep, they are going to finish it instantly. Deep in the darkness of the airport, a group of elite soldiers was moving. These were the commandos of the Special Operations Force. They had practiced for this exact moment thousands of times on another identical Airbus A310. They knew every single bolt and door handle of that plane model. They weren't just going to break in, they were going to perform a high-speed rescue with total precision. They waited for the perfect moment, hidden by the night. As the deadline approached, the hijackers were getting desperate and violent. They had earlier pushed 2 male flight attendants out of the plane onto the tarmac to show they were serious. The clock was ticking toward the final warning. The tension was so thick you could feel it through the airport walls. The whole country was holding its breath. Would the government give in? Would they pay the ransom? The answer came at exactly 6:50 in the morning. In the blink of an eye, the side doors of the plane exploded open. It wasn't a slow entry. It was a sudden flood of black uniforms and flashbangs. The commandos didn't hesitate. They burst into the smoky cabin, shouting for the passengers to stay down on the floor. The hijackers didn't even have time to react. The entire operation took only 30 seconds. Try to count to 30 right now. By the time you reach the end, the fight was already over. All 4 hijackers were neutralized. Not a single passenger was killed. Both flight attendants who were pushed out survived with injuries, but inside the cabin, everyone was saved. It was a masterclass in how to handle a crisis. When the sun came up, the passengers walked off that plane into the humid Singapore air. They were shaken and tired, but they were alive. Singapore had sent a clear message to the entire world that morning. They showed that they protect their people with a level of perfection that is almost impossible to believe. They proved that even a small island can have a backbone of steel. Today, when you walk through Changi Airport, it's peaceful. It's filled with gardens and waterfalls. But that peace exists because the world knows that behind the smiles, there is a shield that never sleeps. And that is how a tiny nation handled one of the scariest nights in aviation history and turned it into a victory for the good guys.